And now we present to you Thac0 with Advantage.
Welcome to Thac0 with Advantage. We're two friends that have been playing D&D a long time. While we both love lots of other RPGs, D&D casts guards and wards and makes it really hard to leave. Hi, I'm Ange, and I have been gaming for so very long. I started with first edition, and I have no idea where time has gone. What even is time? Oh, and I write for Gnome Stew, and I do the Gnome Cast.
I'm Jared, and I remember back when people threw so many swords in fantasy movies, we used to wonder why D&D didn't have rules for throwing swords. You can check out some of my articles on Gnome Stew as well as whatdoiknowjr.com. After we look at the games we're running in the campaign journal, we'll be talking about 5-room dungeons. Then we'll have some recommendations of D&D related content for you to check out in our downtime research segment.
Now stand by for station identification. This is WD&D the Role Player. Now we're going to Mac McKinney in the morning game with Wolfman. Saving throw categories have changed a bit over time in D&D. Instead of saves based on ability scores, the saving throw categories were obviously logical death rays and poison, wands, turn to stone, dragon's breath, and spells and staves. Overcomplicated, obtuse garbage, Mac. Can't say I disagree, Wolfman, and boy, can I say that this certainly didn't lead to long discussions at the table about what happens if a wand casts a spell, or a spell creates a death ray, or a dragon's breath causes petrification. Exactly what I'm talking about, McKinney. Thank goodness, but we never get confused about what saves are logical now. But last night, we were still arguing about whether that charm effect was a wisdom or charisma-based saving throw. I know, the mage was really a myth, but the bard managed to convince everybody by counterspelling the fireball and making us all dance. A lot.
Let me just finish up this campaign journal.
In the campaign journal, I have nothing. It turns out we ended up not playing City of Cowls for the last session we got together. The GM was dealing with some sleep deprivation, and so we made the decision that we were not going to force him to run. We are friends. We care for his mental health and his physical health. But we still got together and we ended up playing some light board games as well, which was pretty cool and fun. And we talked about the future of what we're going to be doing in that group and all of that. Now, summer always ends up being feast or famine with gaming. As people who grew up as teenagers with gaming, we kind of think we have these wonderfully light schedules in the summer, like in the days of yore when we were kids on summer break. But instead, you end up missing sessions due to other obligations. The most recent old Margrave game was canceled because I had friends in from out of town for a gaming weekend. And I got plenty of gaming in, but the closest we got to traditional fantasy was probably playing Betrayal at Baldur's Gate, which is, Betrayal at House on the Hill, but themed Baldur's Gate instead. We did also do a session of The One Ring, but it's fantasy. It is fantasy, but because it is so very specifically Tolkien, I don't know how closely I associate it with, our high fantasy epic D&D-ishness.
You are definitely channeled into playing Tolkien stories in that game, which is good, but also, it's not wide open.
That's actually the kind of conversation we had after we were done playing, because everyone had a good time, but it was like, that was very much playing a Tolkien journey and not necessarily good for anything else. We struggled a little bit with some of the other things we were trying to do. In that weekend, we also played an X-Men game in Anima Prime where I got to play magic, and I ran a supernatural-ish game in Savage Worlds. So it was a really fun weekend. It just didn't include any D&D or directly D&D adjacent games. The next session of City Cowls is also getting canceled because I am off to New England for a family event, and Ree's Player is also available for something else that I cannot remember at this moment in time, but we did decide, two of us are unavailable for that date, so no gaming. Womp, womp, womp.
I got some gaming in, but I did also have to cancel my Curse of Strahd game because due to weeks of 90-degree weather and my tendency when I go in and out of air conditioning too much to have my migraines just completely take over my life, I ended up canceling the Curse of Strahd game. It's not constant, but when it's in the 90s and I'm going in and out of air conditioning, it's just like tempting my brain to say, hey, what if we just had intense pain right now?
This summer's been brutal.
It has. But we did get our Midgard game in, and our party did start traveling in the Plane of Shadows, taking a shortcut to the ancient ruins where they need to find out what the Sultan's explorers are researching. While they were traveling, in this case, because the roads can shift and move, the distance that they're traveling is like, hey, instead of a couple months, we'll roll a 1d6 and see that's how many days. And Jeremiah rolled a 6. So it is the maximum amount of days that they'll be traveling in the Plane of Shadows. Each day of the adventure, we got through 3 days, and I was having them meet the Road Wardens. In the Midgard setting, in the Plane of Shadows, the Road Wardens are people from different cultures that maintain the Shadow Roads. So they may not necessarily like each other that much, but they know that having that stable conduit through the plane is important to all of them. So the Road Wardens are made up of things like the Dargul and the Shadow Fae and the Sable Elves and Bear Folk. I kind of had some fun just introducing the different types of Road Wardens that show up and make sure that everything is going okay on the road. We did have an encounter later, and I was rolling to see if any Road Wardens were showing up, and I forgot for like 2 rounds, but I did roll the d20s later, and they would not have shown up. I kind of liked, they also ran into the Whisperer in Darkness, which is, I'm not going to spoil this for Ange, but it is basically an avatar of some other entity. But the Whisperer in Darkness likes to use esoteric technology to perform body modification surgery. And he basically offered to sell the PCs some body modifications that would be useful. They would totally give them extra abilities. Nobody really wanted to. Apparently, no matter how good he was as a surgeon, they just did not want to have like extra limbs grafted on or claws or, steel spines or anything like that could have been very useful in some circumstances.
No, thank you.
Eventually, they ran into part of the road that had been breached because there are stones that keep the road stable, and one of them had been overturned. And they were attacked by Sons of Fenris. And Sons of Fenris are, as the name implies, Sons of Fenris. They are these nasty wolf creatures that have snakes for tongues, and these snakes can shoot acid out of them as a breath weapon. And they also are huge, and they can swallow people with their massive bite. They roll a ridiculous number of dice whenever their bite actually hits. Thankfully, at least 2 of them were tied up for most of the fight, trying to kill first the Bard as a T-Rex and then the Bard as a mammoth. So the hit points were a buffer to being swallowed.
The Bard is the hit point sponge.
Unfortunately, the breath weapon from the snakes took out 2 of their 3 horses. I apologize. I did not make their deaths very graphic. They just kind of went away. But they made it through.
It is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes taking horses into a very dangerous environment is very dangerous for the horses.
It still felt a little better than just leaving them behind.
Oh, yeah. No,
So-
I get it. But after they managed to survive the Sons of Fenris, we're going to see how much more they're going to run into in the next 3 days, because they got halfway across the Shadow Road.
Thanks, Marin.
Welcome to the Dungeon Master's Workshop.
The 5-room dungeon is a concept first described by John 4 at the Role Playing Tips blog. The purpose of the 5-room dungeon is to provide a succinct adventure structure that provides a variety of encounters while progressing towards a goal. We're going to look at why you may want to use a 5-room dungeon and how to put one together for your campaign. Let's start off discussing what a 5-room dungeon is. What's the structure of this 5-room dungeon? It sounds like an apartment complex.
That's an interesting apartment complex. So, room 1 is your entrance and guardian. Room 2 is a puzzle or role-playing challenge. Room 3 is a trick or setback. Room 4 is a climax, big battle, or conflict. Room 5 is the reward, revelation, and or plot twist.
Now, does a 5-room dungeon need to be exactly, literally 5 rooms?
It certainly does not. Basically, you could very easily group things to you may have one room for that entrance and guardian, but you might have a section that is the puzzle, an area that has a puzzle and a role-playing challenge in it. And then another section that is kind of this tricky area that you have to figure out what the actual real way to get through something is. So you can expand these out to multiple rooms with those same themes.
Yeah, and technically, like, your puzzle could be a maze, which
Mhm.
is going to be a series of corridors that you have to navigate through. Could be if it's a role-playing challenge, you found a village. There's plenty of rooms in that village, but it's, as far as the quote-unquote 5-room dungeon goes, it's it is a section unto itself. In some
Yeah.
ways, you could call this whole thing the 5-section dungeon, but
Yeah.
that doesn't sound as exciting.
It doesn't. And I mean, while it can be used for any kind of adventure planning, the idea really was for people like Ange and I that are not really big fans of having mega dungeons, but also want to have dungeons show up once in a while. So it kind of channels it into, okay, here's how you can do it effectively without it going on forever.
Yeah. What is the history of this? How long has this concept been around? Because I've heard of it for well over a decade now.
Yeah, I'm not sure when he first started talking about it. I was going to say I can think of it going all the way back to at least the beginning of 5th edition, people using this term.
I want to say it's even older than that, because
it might be.
I believe I was going to say when I started writing for Gnome Stew in 2014, but that's around the time 5th edition came out. There was already an article on the Stew about different ideas for 5-room dungeons. So it's at least been well over a decade.
Yeah, and if you go to the Role Playing Tips blog and sign up for the newsletter, you get a book about it free. And it goes through the whole idea of it and also gives examples for, like, here's some example. Here's several pages of examples of what an entrance and guardian could be. Here's several pages of, what your puzzles could be. So it's kind of worth doing.
So let's talk about the entrance, our entrance and guardian. What does it mean? And what are some things we can do with this?
So the whole point of having the entrance and guardian is it is kind of meant to explain why nobody else has conquered this dungeon before. What keeps people from making it further into the dungeon in the first place? So that means it could be everyone knows it exists, but they don't know exactly where the entrance is at. That's almost like Smog's lair. We need to wait until the moon comes up and shines the light on it so we can see where the actual entrance is. It could just be like everyone that shows up, there's a big honking ogre that just clubs you over the head and you die, and he lives there all the time, and you're the first ones that didn't die when he clubs you over the head. But it is meant to provide a little bit of that story of why you're the ones finally cracking this nut.
If you haven't listened to our previous episode about dungeon ecology, you should probably go give that one a listen as well, because that can help you decide what you put here as the guardian to basically explain why hasn't anything ever come at this dungeon before. When I did the Medusa in the Zendrick campaign, this area was basically the first cavern-looking chamber of this tunnel system where there was a giant snake plus a bunch of small rattlesnakes to cause the players, like, oh, it's their guard dog, and that's when the players decided to be super clever and cast silence so nobody would know that they were fighting the giant guard snake, and then the bard stepped out of the silence to cast Shatter.
Oh,
I love
goodness.
my players.
Uh-huh. I would also say this is probably a really good example right off the bat of where you can have more than one of these room 1 examples, because you could very easily have like a hidden entrance and a guardian right off the bat. I mean, that makes perfect sense. There was a really good example of this in Adventurers League adventure that I ran that was part of the Storm King's Thunder season. Sort of the reason nobody could get in is because there is this statue, and it's this huge statue, and it's facing the wrong direction. And you had to take these poles and basically push it until it's facing the other direction. It's not hard for PCs to do, and it's not like a super difficult puzzle, but it is like this idea that, oh, you have to do something before it opens up, except when you go to leave, that statue animates and fights you. So in a way, it tells you the story of why people haven't conquered this dungeon at the end when you try and leave again.
That makes me think of all the video games that have the you must turn these statues to face these particular directions. Oh my God, there's so many of those.
See,
And
thankfully, this one.
if I can't solve it right away, I'm going to the internet and going, what do I do in this room, man?
That was another thing I appreciated about this is I like things that are contextual to the world. It was very obvious that the statue should be facing out towards the sunrise, and you could see that the base moved. So it's not a super difficult puzzle, but it's still the idea that people have to pay attention to the environment and then just do the thing. I like simple puzzles like that.
Yeah. It's like you have to give your players the contextual clues so they know what they need to do. I had one of these. I mean, let's move to talking about puzzles. Room 2, puzzles, role-playing challenge. What can we put here? How does this play out?
So it mentions, like in the short form, when they're, kind of discussing these are what the rooms are, it mentions a puzzle or role-playing challenge. But what it really kind of goes into is this should be something that challenges the players, hopefully that challenges a different player than your entrance did, and probably is meant to stretch their non-combat muscles.
Yes.
So it doesn't literally have to be a puzzle, but it can, or even just a role-playing thing, but it is something that is not combat. It is something that you do a little bit different and gives somebody else in the party's time to shine.
Yep. In the first dungeon I put them through in the Zendrick campaign, this room was essentially a puzzle that had paintings on the wall of various heroic characters doing things and a pedestal in the middle of the room. Most of the players are just like, I don't know, going around trying to touch parts of the wall, touch parts of the painting to see if they can make something open up. And the sorceress, who was a changeling, jumped up on the pedestal. And this was the first time she revealed that she was a changeling, because she jumped up on the pedestal and made herself look like one of the heroes in the painting, which made a light appear on the wall that the door would open in. And it was like, oh, okay, I now know what to do. And we decided that nobody actually saw her change herself to look exactly like that hero. So it was a fun role-playing moment for the players, but it was also a moment where the player figured it out pretty easy based on those contextual clues. I will tell you, I am one of those players that doesn't like puzzles, because the moment I get frustrated, I'm the one in the video game who runs to the internet and tells me, how do I solve this? Because I am tired of banging my head against the wall and I want to get to the next room.
See, what's interesting about that is, not to spoil the actual adventure we were playing, but I did run a thing for all of you just a couple of weeks ago that had a puzzle room, and I liked it because it was thematic, but I don't think it was that hard to figure out. So I figured I'll gauge you on this one now, since we're talking about this.
Actually, you need to remind me, which one are we talking about?
The one that was basically the Fifth Element.
Yeah. That one that works. That was pretty easy. That was like, okay, we have an idea. Although I will say, what is prone to happen when you put a puzzle in front of your players is the players will make it way more complicated than it needs to be. Because there was like all this debate about what do we need to do for this element? What do we need to do for this element? And I'm just like, you have prestidigitation, make it hot. Warm it up.
Yeah, I mean, it literally says in the adventure, like, anything that's even vaguely, as long as someone identifies this is fire and something is about making fire or warmth or whatever, that will satisfy that condition. Yeah,
and at that particular time, I was playing my paladin, who is not the smartest tool in the shed. So I was mostly having her stand in the center of the room, being the guard, and just offering unhelpful suggestions. But as the player that is also a GM, I'm just like, just go spit on it.
What's funny about that too is I kind of like that. Sometimes I don't like it when things are too obviously related to media that everyone has seen. But I kind of liked it in that instance because you have an example of a movie where they didn't just walk in and go, oh, this is really simple when they saw these things. Like, you can picture from the movie how people could get turned around and not figure out the puzzle until something goofy happened that, and then the thing opens up.
What about the role-playing aspect of this? because you could combine the role playing and the puzzle with the, one is telling the truth, one is telling a lie, and you get to have these conversations with these NPC statues that would break the GM's brain. What other types of things can you do to just make it a role playing challenge?
One of the things that was kind of interesting when they were talking about drifting this to other genres was like, this could be where you have an AI that is like asking you why you belong in this place and you trying to come up with a good example of why you belong there. However, we know that you can make an AI out of magic. That's fine. You could have a guardian spirit that also won't let you pass unless you tell it why you're here and what you are looking for. So you could do the guardian spirit thing that just keeps the doors closed until you interact with it. You could have it like you were talking about with the maze. You could have somebody expressly that if you role play, they will guide you through the maze. But it'd be much harder if you don't.
It could be the goblins decided to set up a marketplace in this room. Mm-hmm. It's a really dumb idea, but this is what the goblins decided to do. So now you have a whole little tribe of goblins that you can have a conversation with and maybe buy some of their crap to make them happy and let you get past this room quicker.
And maybe run back and say, did you still have that one healing potion? Because I didn't think I'd need it, but I kind of do now. Yeah.
That is actually on I believe it is the second level of the Dungeon of the Mad Mage, is depending upon how you approach it. The way we approached it, the first area we came across was the Goblin Bazaar. The head of the goblins wants to be a big old merchant, so he made his goblins set up a bazaar. And it's not very good, but it's there.
The other thing that was funny is when I was thinking about this room and this part of the challenge, spoilers for Honor Among Thieves, this totally reminded me of the bridge when Zank was explaining how to get across the bridge and what they needed to do and what happened and how they actually got across the bridge.
Well, that'll move us to our next room, trick or the setback. How is that different from the puzzle? Because like you just described, Zank was describing this whole bridge that you must be very careful to cross over, and then they step on the wrong stone anyway and have to run because the damn thing is falling apart on them.
Basically, this section is talking about, and I will say this very carefully because it's not one of my favorite tropes, you can put a red herring in this room, like, hey, I think this is exactly the thing we need. Oh, it's not the thing we need. But it's mainly about making it look like there is one resolution, but it's actually a different resolution. You don't have to make that a full red herring. You can, and I guess this sort of counts as a red herring. You could make it like there is a door that is obvious and there's a hidden door. If you see a door that's obvious, you're going to go through that and not even think about that. And then when you go through the door that's obvious, then all of a sudden you're in some place where you have to deal with something you didn't want to have to deal with, and it doesn't go anywhere, so you have to go back and figure out where that secret door is at. That is the type of thing that we're talking about in this section.
In general, I am against purposefully putting in red herrings because your players are very adept at making them on their own. All you got to do is just put stuff in there, and the players will come up with all sorts of wacky red herrings about why something is there. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a very well-developed red herring.
Mm-hmm.
In the old Margrave game, when they rushed into the old fallen down fortress ruins, this was in there. It was the room with the awakened tree. There was an item that looked like the Briar King's crown that they needed, but it was an illusion, and it was basically meant to draw them into the range of the tree so it could wallop them, which they fell for it, and it did it. And, I will say I didn't write that one. The players still kind of fell for it really well.
My biggest caveat when it comes to red herrings is I don't like to give people false information, especially when they have to work for it. When someone has to work for information and then you lie to them, it feels you're the DM. You can lie to them about everything and then say, no, nothing is what you thought it was. Like, it does not feel satisfying to me to put it that way.
That behavior is why I have so many players I go to, show me on the dial where the bad GM hurt you. So frustrating to try and run a game for players that don't trust you because of the way GMs in the past have behaved.
Now, I am not against playing up some information that may not be as important as you think. Like, oh, there's going to be something that is like fire related coming up. And there is, but it's like a minor trap. It's not the main boss. But you're thinking, oh, it's going to be a fire giant or a red dragon or something like that. I don't mind that kind of red herring because you're not lying to anyone. You're just kind of giving them a hint about something harder than what you would normally hint at.
Yeah, I do think that this room 3 is it can be a little confused with room 2 as far as being puzzle setback, like where's the line between the two of them? But it should still be something that challenges the players in your group, but challenges different of them. Like if the previous room was a traditional puzzle, have this one be like a strength challenge or something along those lines. Like the floor is giving way and now you need to figure out ways to cross it. It needs to be things that challenge different parts of the players.
This is like the examples that they were giving. They said this is also like if you're going to have that classic thing in the dungeon where there's teleporters, this is that area. Okay, I stand on this teleporter, it sends me here. This doesn't go anywhere. I stand on this teleporter, it sends me here. That's where we need to go. Just to where you have to explore a little bit to figure out how you actually proceed. The other thing that I was going to say is, like I gave the example of there's the obvious door and then there's the hidden door. I would say that is fine, but when they go through the obvious door and get ambushed by something and have to fight it, make sure they get something for it. It may be okay if they just find the hidden door and shortcut all of this, but if they do run smack dab into that thing and they can't get deeper into the dungeon, but they did get ambushed, give them some treasure or something when they run into that, surprise. And actually, it reminds me a lot of, there's several places in Baldur's Gate 3 that kind of do this, where it's like, okay, I know the main thing I'm looking for in this dungeon. It's not here, but at least I found this ridiculous scroll that I can only use once, but it's going to be really effective if I do use it.
I mean, it's a video game. You explore everything.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's useless. You still go down this hallway because the map needs to be open and clear.
But I agree with you. It is very easy to say room 3 is another puzzle room.
Yeah,
it still works.
It still definitely works. I just think you need to make sure that you are doing different things with room 2 and room 3. Even if
otherwise it just feels like room
purposes.
2 is an area instead of a room. I think the key there is if you have a role-playing challenge in room 2, then this could probably be a trap.
Yeah.
If room 2 is a puzzle, this should probably be something that is not making them think too hard. It might just be like, oh, we have to move all these rocks because there was a cave in.
So let's move to room 4, our climactic big battle or conflict. How do we make this come together in a satisfying way? And why is room 4 our climactic battle?
Room 4 is the climactic battle because when you get to the next room, it's not that you don't give them a reward, it's that there's something else going on top of giving them the reward that they came here for. This one, again, like depending on how you plot some of this out, we have pretty much done a dungeon where you don't necessarily have to have that many fights in it. And technically, this doesn't need to be a fight either. This could be something like, hey, there's a bunch of platforms that are moving and I have to jump from one to another while fire is shooting up out of the ground. Yeah, I just described Mario. But you could make it something like that as long as it feels epic. As long as it feels epic and they have to do something, this is the part of the dungeon that should challenge them the most.
The one caveat I'll put in there is if this is D&D, and this doesn't have to be D&D, you can use the structure for any type of game that has players going into a location to do things. But if this is D&D, foregoing having any combat at all can leave some of your players frustrated.
Yeah.
Because everyone is designed around being able to function in a combat. So giving them a combat is one easy way to make sure that everyone in the group has a moment where they can do something cool.
Yeah.
There are other systems where that may not be the case. In Savage Worlds, it is very possible to build a party that has just a couple of combat monsters and other people who are more support oriented. That one, they wouldn't necessarily feel as disappointed if they didn't get to punch a monster in the face. But I will say, if you've avoided combat so far and you're running actual D&D or something that is very similar to D&D, be careful if you don't give them that combat, because it could leave some of the players being a little disappointed. I will say one of the worst D&D games I ever played at a con, I picked the fighter because I just wanted to play something simple, and she never put anything in front of us that we could fight.
Yeah, that's not good. Now, if you do have one of those wild parties that is like a bard, a rogue, just all people that have a bunch of other skills, maybe you can get, you can get away with that. But if you have a barbarian or a fighter or a monk in your group, they're not going to be real happy if they don't get to use some of their features.
Yeah, this is definitely has to be based on the group and the game you're running, the group in front of you, and what those players actually enjoy in the game.
Now, I will say this room, because this is supposed to be the most challenging thing in the dungeon, this is a great room to do what 4th edition was really good at, and that is having a trap or an obstacle going off while the fight is going on. So you're not just fighting a thing, you're also dodging like saw blades in the floor, or wait, why did I come up with that example? Or, the pillar that shoots fire like once per round, these things where there's other things going on beyond the fight, so that you're feeling this is a major climax. This isn't just a fight. This is like the fight of this whole thing.
Yeah, definitely. This is as we called it, the climax of this dungeon. It's the big dramatic moment where you face the biggest challenge that this whole structure has to offer you, which is why room 5 is the reward, the revelation, or the plot twist. Why are we having room 5 be the way we wrap up the dungeon?
Because a lot of room 5 is meant to propel you forward into the next thing you're doing in the campaign. So let's say you came here because you found out about this wondrous treasure, but you also find out that there's an even, bigger, cooler artifact that is in this book that you happen to find in the midst of all of this other treasure. So it's not just that you find this, it's that you, for example, you get the revelation. You find out, oh, there's more to this than I realized. Or you find out, hey, every 253 years, this one demon lord shows up, and hey, what year is it? And suddenly you realize that as you're going through this dungeon and collecting this treasure at the end of it. I definitely, and they say this too, if you read any of the advice on this, your plot twist should not be you don't get anything. That sucks.
Oh God, don't do that. Don't do that again.
No,
show me on the doll where the bad GM hurt you.
Yeah, if they went through all of this, they should get something at the end. It is possible that they thought one type of treasure was here and it's a different type of treasure, but just make sure their heart wasn't set on that one that they were going after if you do swap it for something else. But that is one thing that you can do with that plot twist. They do also mention you can make the plot twist, hey, we found this treasure, this looks really simple, and they get ready to leave and there's something else they have to fight.
I'm sorry, Mario, your MacGuffin is in another castle.
But yeah, a lot of this is just about projecting forward into the rest of the campaign. Like, you don't just get the treasure, you get a hint as to what you should be doing next.
Or if you're running something like this as a one-shot where you're not expecting to continue a campaign beyond this, maybe this is the room that gives context to everything they've seen before. This is the room with the murals, in addition to being the treasure hoard, this is also where the murals are on the wall explaining the story of the lich that was living here, or, what was going on in this place and why it exists.
Yeah, we talked about that last episode in the dungeon ecology thing. Sometimes there could be a very deep story about why this dungeon exists, and if you never tell it to the players, it doesn't matter. Yeah. It's just a bunch of random rooms. So yeah, this is a great place for that.
There is an aspect of gaming, and this goes both for GMs and the stories they create for their games and for players, and the stories and backgrounds they create for their characters, if it never gets to the table, it doesn't exist. You know, you can have all these really cool ideas about your character's backstory, but if it never comes up in play, it doesn't exist because none of the other players know. The GM may not even know. You know, whereas as a GM, if you have all this really cool backstory stuff about a setting and you have no way of getting it to your players, that can be a little bit of a letdown for you. This is actually, I think we talked a little bit about this when we talked about published adventures and how some published adventures go a little overboard on giving you information about the location that you have no means of actually getting to the players. Like all of the drow that have names and histories in Dungeon of the Mad Mage. It's like,
why would I find this out?
the players are never going to learn any of this information. Sometimes you do that stuff just for yourself as the GM, but if you never get to share it with your players, does it really exist? And, you know, I don't want anyone to feel like they have to do that level of detail when really you don't, because if it doesn't make it to the players, it doesn't exist. But you can get some of that information to your players in this type of location.
I'd also like to point out, because I don't want to jump over this too fast, this is room 5, so this is meant to be a separate area than where you had that climactic battle, which means you can do the thing where there's like a trap or a puzzle or something to get to that treasure. Just don't make it to where it's not obvious, because you are supposed to now be able to go claim that thing, and it should be a pretty obvious thing.
I must confess that I have been completely guilty of putting the prophecy in the 5th room of the dungeon, so to speak. I have also put the 5th room behind a secret door. But at the same time, one of the things to know about putting secret doors in your dungeons or any place is if it has important stuff behind it, you need to make sure your players discover it. Never put anything important behind a door the players can fail to find or open. You can have it be a secret door, but you got to still make sure the players find it. And this, you will find people out there that say, well, that's cheating. That's too cheesy if you're just giving it to the players. They still got to roll. It's like, oh, come on. Just tell the player with the highest perception or the damned elf who's supposed to be able to see secret doors, hey, you see a thing over there that looks a little odd. And let the players go investigate it and open it. You can still do these things without feeling like you're just putting everything on a silver platter and give the players the cool stuff.
There is something to be said to rewarding somebody that rolled high. Like, you're not going to get this, but you get to tell the story of how you found it as opposed to everybody else. So it's not a meaningless roll. It's just kind of determining who gets to figure out, oh, I am the one that happened into this secret passageway.
I will very often do everyone give me this roll, whatever roll it is, perception, notice, whatever the game is and whatever it's calling for. And I'm just going to give the thing to the player that rolled the highest. Usually that's going to be the player that has the highest skill in that. But sometimes it's going to be the dumb barbarian that rolls high enough on an intelligence roll to know the thing that lets them do a thing that advances the game. It's still going to go to somebody. It's just the die just randomizes who gets that particular moment in the scene.
The other thing, and this is something I have done, I definitely know Chris does this, rolling the die sometimes can just be, how much information am I going to give you? You will find the secret door, but if you don't roll above a 15, you don't find out there's a trap on it. You know, that sort of thing.
That's very gumshoe system. Which, if you've never read the Gumshoe system, I highly recommend taking a look at it, because as a philosophy for how you run games is incredibly helpful to making mysteries much more fun for you and your players.
Honestly, if we ever finally get that skill challenge thing, we might want to roll some of that in there where it's like, if someone is proficient in something, give them stuff just for being proficient once in a while. You know better than an average person because you are proficient, so you just get this.
Yeah. One of the things I want to ask is, a lot of the aspects of this 5-room dungeon reminds me a bit of the story structure.
Mhm.
You have your opening, you have your rising action, you have your climax, you have your denouement, all of these little things. Do you think that's on purpose?
Oh, I'm absolutely certain that that's the case. I mean, we were discussing last episode when we were talking about dungeon ecology. Why did dungeons become popular? It's because dungeons give you a shorthand for telling a story because
Mhm.
this room does this room does this. This is exactly that philosophy, just made a little bit more explicit. Like every room doesn't just tell a story, it literally is progressing a story that you are introducing to the players.
Although I still do think, based on what we were talking about last episode, that it is still the idea that your players can't go
Yes.
everywhere. They have
Yeah.
to, they're here. You have some control on what they're going to do next.
Yeah. You guys can spread out and do whatever as soon as you get out of the dungeon. I'll deal with it. But for now, I know exactly the few places that you can go, and I feel better for that because I can prep them.
What if we want to do a mega dungeon or something larger? Can we still use these concepts in that mega dungeon?
Yes. And I think there are two different ways you can kind of do that. One, we already sort of talked about where it's like, this isn't the puzzle room, this is the puzzle section of the dungeon. The other thing is almost every one of these rooms has, it can be this or this. So in that second area, you have to do some role playing and some puzzles and maybe a little bit more role playing before you get out. And that's 3 different areas there. So you can group these things into like clusters of going back and forth to different things that fit that theme. The other thing is when you're talking about a mega dungeon, and you mentioned this last episode with Undermountain, you can use this structure, a 5-room dungeon, for each level of a dungeon.
Mm-hmm.
And just raise the stakes for each one of those 5-room dungeons that is a lower level again.
Yeah, you're still only going to generally have one entrance, one climactic area, one reward area, but you can fit in as many other pieces as you want of the other parts, and some of those can just be straight up combat. You can have that. There's an ogre in this room. He wants to punch your face in. Deal with it. There is a gelatinous cube coming down the hallway at you. How do you deal with it? You can just filter in some of these other things. I think the point being you want to have a degree of variety.
Mhm.
You want to intersperse things. I wouldn't necessarily say string 4 puzzles together,
No.
then string 4 physical challenges together. It's like, no, mix them up. Mix them up, spread them out. Go back to our dungeon ecology episode and look at that and take a look at how you might want to populate a dungeon, and then take this and put it together. And maybe you'll have an interesting dungeon that won't lose your players' attention.
And as much as I really like this philosophy, and it's great for wrapping your mind around making a dungeon, you don't have to use this structure for every dungeon you make. This is just a really good, concise way to say, I really want to do a dungeon, but I don't want to think too hard about it. I just, and when I say think too hard about it, I'm not implying at all that any GM should ever half-ass their dungeon. I am just saying sometimes you want to put your mental effort into the details and not the overall outline.
I'm going to totally say you are completely allowed to half-ass your dungeon if you need to. It's all based on the situation you're in. I very much would half-ass the dungeons I put in front of the kids because I knew they didn't care about it as much as the adults did. You can put in the effort you need to for these things.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of effort, what if I don't want to do even 5 rooms? Can I do 3 rooms and make it work?
3 is probably the most you can condense this, but I think you can get it to 3. I think it's really easy to have the entrance and guardian. And then, as we already talked about, 2 and 3 are fuzzy enough you can merge that into one thing. You can make that trick or setback or puzzle into a thing.
I kind of did a 3-room thing when I ran for my friend's children at Origins a couple of years ago. The opening was a big fight in front of the dungeon. Basically, these are the mercenaries that the big bad hired to do the thing, and they had to fight through them to get into the dungeon. Once they were in the dungeon, then it was kind of some exploration and puzzles. It was like not officially one room. It was a level of the dungeon of several small rooms, but it was all mostly puzzles, not a whole lot of fighting. And then the last section was the big room with the climax of fighting the big bad that they thought they had killed 4 years ago. That type of thing.
And yeah, that was what I was going to say. If we're condensing room one, or we're using room one, we're condensing room 2 and 3 into one thing. You can have the reward in the same room with the boss fight.
Yeah.
And then that's your room 3. In fact, it reminded me, there's a couple areas like in Celasta. We keep thinking about video games because both of us have played through a lot of video game RPGs. But, I can think of a few places in Celasta where there's like literally like this treasure chest in the middle of the area where you're fighting. And touching it is what starts the fight. And you can totally do that and roll room 4 and 5 into one room that way.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely ways to shortcut it. It's just consider these concepts when you're putting together a dungeon to make sure you have enough variety that challenges the players on different levels and isn't all just a combat machine. Combat grinder?
Yeah. We're talking about not making it all a combat grinder, but there are groups that do want things to just be a combat grinder. I would say you can still fit more combat into this than the structure might originally hint at, because you have that guardian, your puzzle or role-playing challenge, you could have something attacking them while they are trying to figure out a puzzle. You could have the role-playing challenge potentially be a fight. I don't like to do that too often, but you can have it be like you have to talk this thing into letting you go, and if you make it mad, it turns into a fight. Then it goes from being, this was the Bard's showcase to this is the Barbarian's showcase again.
Just don't, if it's one of those games where the Bard is always circumventing the fight, let the Barbarian actually get to hit something on occasion.
Yeah.
You need to make both of those players happy. That's probably a whole other topic, and what I've been pondering is, what do you do when you have the character that likes to circumvent every challenge and gets upset when now everyone has to fight? Yeah, but I charmed him. I got a 20 on my persuasion roll.
I'm just going to say, I'm going to bring up Star Wars again. The Jedi mind trick doesn't work on everybody. There's a reason for that.
Yes.
Because somebody has to use a different skill other than use force. I really think this is a pretty flexible design. I like anything that makes stuff very obvious. And it doesn't have to be the thing you use all the time, but it's so nice to have that to fall back on when you are sitting there going, how am I going to structure this adventure?
It's the type of framework that once you kind of get it down, you can easily break its rules to do other things.
Yes, I am a firm believer in this with tropes or anything like that. You learn how to do it the way it's supposed to be done so you can learn to intentionally subvert it. You don't just go straight to subverting it.
Right, exactly.
Now let's join Ange and Jared for some downtime research, where they do the work so we don't have to.
Every episode, we're going to look for something related to D&D that we want to pass along to our listeners. It might be products, websites, videos, or podcasts, but it'll always be something that we think will enhance your D&D experience. So now, before we get into anything else, I'm going to talk about our Eldritch Invocation. We have a Patreon now, so if you would like to help us do the show and provide additional content for you, we would love it if you decided to join. We've got our own Discord, and we'll be releasing additional supplementary material. There is more stuff than you can shake a casting implement at. And on top of all of that extra stuff and having the warm glow of knowing that you are providing us with your power by being our patron, I am making the offer once again to hex anyone you want me to hex. Just let me know.
I'm not sure on the legality of all of that.
It's okay. Nobody can trace hexes. It's fine.
All right.
And you can find our Patreon at http://www.patreon.com/THAC0WA.
Thac0WA. So in this past year, I have gotten back into reading fiction. Basically, I'm finally allowing myself to read digitally on a tablet because I got past my no, reading must be in a physical book that you turn the pages. No, 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 no. I'm in the future. I can read it on my tablet. It's digital. It's so much easier. Anyway, in the reading of fiction, I have been getting a lot of recommendations from people and keeping a list of books. And one of those books that keeps being recommended to me is Dungeon Crawler Carl. It is absolutely on my TBR list, but unfortunately, my library only has a digital copy in French. WTF. Anyway, I was very interested to see that Renegade is going to be releasing a Dungeon Crawler Carl RPG. This should be interesting. I've heard very mixed things about Renegade and the games they've put out, built on their Essence 20 system. And I have friends that know both Dungeon Crawler Carl and some of their games, i.e. G.I. Joe, Transformers, Power Rangers, etc. And they don't think that would be a good combination with Dungeon Crawler Carl. But either way, it will be very interesting to see what they do with that IP. And it is also very cool to see basically an IP that was inspired by our RPGs turned into an RPG, bringing it all full circle. We'll have a link to that announcement in our show notes.
It reminds me of that trend a few years back where people would take the text from Magic cards and translate it into another language, and then take whatever it translated it into and translate it back to English to see how mangled it got when they translated it one way and then back.
Years and years and years ago, when I was playing EverQuest on the forums, we had a guy who would pretend to be one of the very early NPC kobold or gnoll bosses you would fight in one of the areas, in one of the beginning areas. And what he would do is he would write what he wanted to say. He would feed it through a translator into another language, put it back into another language, and then bring it back into English and post it that way. So he sounded absolutely off the wall.
The only other thing I would say about Essence 20 is, because I don't like to overly malign anything, but it does take the D20 as the basis for a game, which is already swingy, and finds a way to make it swingier and less predictable. Sometimes in a more frustrating way. Some things can be unpredictable but still fun. This can be unpredictable, but also dice hate me, and they continue to hate me the entire session, and all I can do is just rely on the dice because I have no bonuses.
Yeah, I have some friends who they ran a 3-table event at Origins a couple of years ago where they had one table of G.I. Joe, one table of Transformers, and one table of Power Rangers, and they got involved in interdimensional shenanigans that had them swapping tables and all of this. And it was an incredibly fun experience, but they all said it was fun in spite of the system, not because of the system.
It is a very interesting system. I'll put it that way. Having run G.I. Joe in it a few times, it's interesting. So for my shill that I would like to bring up this week, I have an expensive one. It got my attention for a couple of reasons. I am once again going to bring up Beetle and Grimm's. I know it's really expensive. I'm sorry. I can't help it.
They make such pretty stuff.
It is. It's so neat to at least look at the stuff. In this case, the stuff we're talking about, though, is the 10th anniversary legendary edition of Tyranny of Dragons. The reason I wanted to bring this up is because it's been 10 years since Tyranny of Dragons came out, the first D&D 5th edition adventure, and it's been 10 years now.
You're old.
Yeah. So they are re-releasing it, and you might remember it was originally two separate books. It's all going to be in one box, and it's going to be the same thing that they normally do, where they break out the chapters into individual soft covers so they're a little easier to use at the table. It's going to have some key NPC miniatures. It's going to have battle maps for all the key areas. There's going to be handouts and encounter cards and a custom DM screen. So all of that stuff that you're used to seeing if you look at any of these Beetle and Grimm offerings. The other thing, though, that intrigued me about this is they have converted all of the stat blocks to the 2024 format.
Ooh.
And I'm really curious because I know, for example, it's not too hard to swap out a monster from the 2024 monster manual for those monster stats as they were in that adventure because they're designed to be the same CR and just run a little bit different. That's not really the part I'm curious about. I'm curious about some of the NPCs and the unique things that show up in Tyranny of Dragons, if they have reworked any of those to be more the way 2024 expects them to work, or whether it's just putting them in the 2024 format. I don't know if I am, and here is how much it's going to cost. I don't know if I'm $359 pre-order curious or $399 if you don't get it during the pre-order period.
I'm poor. No, thank you.
Yeah, that's the money that you're looking at there. And I will say, I did scrape together enough to do the Curse of Strahd box set that they did. I love it. I cannot do that for every single adventure that comes out.
You know, and to be fair, there is definitely a market for this level of product. There are enough gamers with the disposable income to support this type of thing. Just if you can't afford it, don't feel guilty that you can't afford it.
Not
this
at all.
material is still available, you know, like it's still out there for you to run this campaign without having to spend this kind of money.
But on the other hand, if you have more money than you know what to do with, this is out there. And my reasoning for getting Curse of Strahd is I knew I was going to be running that in person for the first time in however many years. I knew I was going to be running it long term. You know, I wanted to have the full experience for the players. So if this is something that you're going to run for the next 2 years or so, it might be worth, you know, putting $400 into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I bring to the table this time around. It was a little expensive.
And if you have that type of money to expend, we remind you that we do have a Patreon. Smile.
Yes, and I'll hex people. I don't think I won't.
Moving on out of here, we are happily part of the Polygamers Podcast Network, helping you run and play your best games. We think you'll enjoy another Polygamers podcast like
The Gnome Cast. Several gnomes from Gnome Stew get together to talk about gaming topics and themselves in an effort to entertain you and to avoid being thrown in the stew. And who does that show?
We do. We've used up all of our resources, so I think it's time for a long rest. I hope this adventure was rewarding for you. We hope you go exploring with us when we start our next adventure.